Bob Katter has been a member of the House of Representatives since 1993. He was previously in Queensland state politics from 1974 to 1992. Bob was a member of the National Party until 2001, when he left to sit as an independent. He formed his own party, Katter's Australian Party, in 2011. Bob Katter, it's a pleasure meeting you.
Great honour to be on your program.
Now, Queensland and far north Queensland could be doing a lot better. How long do you think it'll take for tourism and small business in your electorate to recover from the shutdowns and these just terrible border closures?
I don't think we're going to recover in the foreseeable future. Our tourism in North Queensland, Early Beach and Cairns and all the surrounding areas, Mission Beach, Mackay, they depend upon overseas tourism in the main, and that's just simply not going to come back in the foreseeable future. So particularly Cairns, which was built entirely on overseas tourism, we're suffering greatly. But I just was so disappointed in the budget. I spoke to Josh Frydenberg, and nicer, better bloke. You'll never find the Josh, but he just went to university too long. Or he went to university. That's his problem. And there's not one single dollar for a make money project. They're all absorb money projects. So instead of dams and petrol refineries and ethanol and industry and agriculture, all there is the usual hurdy-gurdies and merry-go-rounds, the ring roads around the Sydney airport, and 20-lane highways to the Gold Coast, and all the usual rubbish, which is very nice, except it does not create a single job, and it does not earn this country a single dollar, and it is not developing the real economy. It is actually becoming a burden upon the real economy, because the upkeep on those pleasure domes and hurdy-gurdies and self-gratification items, you've got to keep paying for forever. Those football stadiums will never make money. They just have to money. Public money's pumped in all the time.
What do you think needs to be done right now then to speed business recovery?
If you build a rail line into the Galilee, half Australia's coal, thermal coal, the vast bulk of our coal is thermal coal. Half Australia's thermal coal is in the Galilee. All you have to do is build a railway line. Now, Adani opens one mine, like there might be 100, stakeholders in the Galilee. There's most certainly 20, 30, 40 really big stakeholders in the Galilee. GVK, China Rhino associated with China First, which Palmer's associated with, China Stone, which is a Chinese company, Resolve, which is an Australian company, and there are further Australian companies north of Resolve. But they can't open unless they've got a railway line. They don't have a railway line. And Adani's not going to let them use his railway line. He say he will, but he won't.
What aspects of the federal budget then were most positive for North Queensland?
I don't think there's anything positive in there at all. I deeply appreciate the money for the approaches to Cairns. Personally, I did extremely well out of it. I get a lot of votes out of it. But is there a single job created? No. In fact, the specifics that were in the last budget for dams are not there now. There's just a global item of 2,000 million over 10 years, which, excuse my crude language, is simply pissing at nothing. We've burnt up 1,000 million looking at dam schemes. We have not got a single engineering report. And the only dam that will have been built in Queensland in 31 years is the Charters Towers Weir, which I got from the 9 days I had the balance of power. Now, if we get the balance of power in Queensland, there's every likelihood that we will demand 5,000 million, and we'll build the rail line in the Galilee. We'll build Hell's Gate, dam as stage one to the mighty Bradfield Scheme, which will be a development scheme for North Queensland and Australia. And we'll build the copper string transmission line to the Northwest Mineral Province. Now, they have built transmission line into the Ord and into Olympic Dam. Now, that does not create an extra job. It just will enable the companies there to make more money. They're all foreign companies, except Fortescue. So I don't know, of the 9 or 10 companies there, they're all foreign owned, except for Fortescue. So the benefit, that massive benefit for those transmission lines went overseas. They won't open up any new mines as a result of that. If you do it in the Northwest Mineral Province, you'll open up 3 massive mines that can't open up without grid system power. Expensive as it is, it's still half the cost of diesel or gas-fired power stations. So no transmission line, no new mines. So you built 2 transmission lines and you won't get a single mine as a result of that. Again, I just cannot understand how you can run a government and constantly take the taxpayers' money and spend it on golden handshakes for foreign corporations and buying votes. And that's about all it is. Golden handshakes for your supporters and your foreign corporations that you're associated with, and buying votes. That's your budget, and that's been the budget for the last 30 years, since Doug Anthony left the scene federally, and since Joh Bjelke-Petersen was stabbed in the back by his own mob in 1990.
How many North Queensland dams, Bob, do you see commencing in the next 5 years, say?
Well, we've got the biggest river in Australia is the Mitchell River, and there's not one single drop of water being used in the Mitchell River. Not a drop. Matter of fact, it's not even used for cattle because they get fenced off because of crocodiles. So that's the Mitchell, the biggest river in Australia. Murray-Darling's number 2. Number 3 is the Burdekin. And yeah, we do have one dam that was built 35 years ago, I think, on the Burdekin, but it's just one dam. I mean, on the Murray-Darling, which isn't all that much bigger than the Burdekin, they might have 200 dams. Well, we've only got one dam on the Burdekin. When you build a dam, they built one at Griffith, they built one at Emerald, they built one at Mareeba. Each of those towns was under 1,500 people. Each of those towns now is over 20,000 people. And the productivity coming out of them is massive. So when they say a dam doesn't pay for itself, as an investment in tax creation, it is magical. Take Emerald, it cost $145 million, and it brings in $300 million a year in tax revenue each year.
With both state governments appearing to support the new Bradfield scheme in their state election campaigns, do you think it will actually get up, or is this just the usual every couple of years promise?
Yeah. The revised Bradfield scheme, which is a proposal, and the Liberal leader used the word new Bradfield scheme, but nobody knows what it is. But Barnaby Joyce said it's wonderful because it'll give them water in the Murray-Darling. Well, that'll just make up for the environmental flows. It won't create a single extra job, and it most certainly won't create any jobs in Queensland. And when I say that, right along the New South Wales border, there might be some jobs there. But as for the northern half of the state, we get absolutely nothing out of it. So the new Bradfield scheme, spit on it. You're just another piece of machinery to suit the Greens. And that's probably why she won't tell us what it's about. I mean, she doesn't understand it, of course. The lady in charge of the Liberal Party here, she has no idea what she's talking about. And B, maybe she does already know that the proposal is to send water to the Murray-Darling to fill in the gaps created by the environmental flows. And I think all that'll happen will be, it'll just be more environmental flows. So the water will go in from a fair and it will go into the ocean down there as environmental flows. But all I can do is quote the member for New South Wales, and good on him, fighting for his electorate, and he should know, and that's what he said. But as far as no one has any idea what she's talking about, but we just put the diorama before I come on your program, showing exactly what the revised Bradfield scheme, and that was the scheme agreed to by the Bjelke-Petersen government. Announced the scheme and did the giant consortium report outlining the engineering plan and proposals to go ahead. And the federal government, Malcolm Fraser, was responsible for that consortium report as well. And everyone knows that's the revised Bradfield scheme, and everyone knows you use that water on the magnificent black soil plain, which covers all of north and central Queensland. And that's where the water's to go. You can farm for 8, 9, 10 years without using fertiliser. It's the richest soils in the world. And that's the revised Bradfield scheme. New Bradfield scheme, well, no one knows what the hell it is. The original Bradfield scheme was to fill Lake Eyre with water and make it rain in Central Australia. But who only knows what the Liberal lady's running around. But, I've got to say, it's very satisfying for me. I was the original, one of the original 3 that dropped the revised Bradfield scheme. And it's very heartening for me that we've got, One Nation talking about it. Palmer, well, he's in a little tiny party, but he's talking about it. We've got the Liberal Party and the Labor Party both saying they're in favour of it. But there's no commitment of money except the 48 million I got when I had the balance of power, 48 million that I got. And that's all that's gone there, and they've already made a decision to give it back to SMEC, and their proposal for the dam at Hell's Gate completely destroys Bradfield forever. So you've got the Liberal Party lady running around saying she's going to build it, and you've got the Federal Liberal Party already working on the premise that it will never be built. Their dam is 320 metres at Hell's Gate. It needs to be 400 metres to have Bradfield. 320 metres, Townsville gets no water, but infinitely more importantly, Bradfield is destroyed forever.
What are the environmental arguments then against the scheme?
Well, it's sort of funny, because there's no real environmental arguments. The water goes into what's called the major central irrigation area. It's actually on this side of the Great Dividing Range, on the eastern side of the Great Dividing Range, where I am now. But it's an area there's no runoff. It's called the Uplands Desert. And the reason that it's there is because there's no Great Dividing Range. In fact, there's a lake, but there should be a Great Dividing Range. So runoff from the farms, well, there will hardly be any runoff from the farms. It'll divert 1 million megalitres out of the Burdekin River, which won't make much difference to everything. The Burdekin River is a flood river, so it just has a massive flood, and the only difference that the environment's going to know, or nature's going to know, is that the floods won't be quite as horrific and devastating. The floods will be a little bit more restrained. That's the only difference. Start of the year, you'll have a flood. At the end of the year, you'll have a dry riverbed. That's the situation with the Burdekin. The northern rivers, the amount of water you're taking out of them is minuscule, so there'll be no difference to anything up there. Those rivers do run all the time. but you could only divert right up to the very top, so there wouldn't be much change in anything. But the huge change, as far as the ecosystems go, is there's 10 million hectares of prickly acacia tree. Between that and the pigs, the cassowaries are doomed, the dunnarts are doomed, the turtles are doomed in North Queensland. Well, at least we will rescue the flora and fauna of inland North Queensland with this scheme, because we can't irrigate the whole area, but we just irrigate the areas along the rivers so the seeds can't get away. So we've solved the weed problem, not just for now, but forever. So we can take out the existing trees now and know that they will not be replenished by seed coming down the river, because the river banks will now be under irrigation, irrigated pasture. So the answer to the worst environmental holocaust in the nation's history, the prickly acacia tree, and the pigs are not far behind, but there'll be a huge hole torn in the pigs because they're just running rampant, eating little kangaroos, eating the dunnarts, eating all of our fauna, and having a shot at small cattle as well, unfortunately and sadly as well. But so the tremendous difference will change as a result of this. And once you get the Flinders River, we can undertake a little tiny bit of water out of it. So the floods will just be a little bit less devastating, and the river will be dry at the end of the year no matter what we do. So not much change to nature at all. But vitally important tool in the battle against the prickly tree and the pigs will be created here. Those farms that are run in line right along the rivers, pigs won't be able to cross. And all we've got to do now is shoot them out at the watering points.
It's quite interesting though, Bob. You were talking about the new Bradfield scheme and talking about pigs. Next you'll be saying that pigs can fly. I mean, so it's sort of the same thing, isn't it?
I can't help but...
You can use that later on if you like. You can use it one later on.
Said we've got to get rid of cattle because cattle are stomping koalas to death. Now, I'm trying to get on to him because I really want to contact him because I, have desperate need with my cattle. I have desperate need for these tree climbing cattle, that can climb up and stomp a koala.
Well, they're vicious. They are very vicious animals.
Tree climbing cattle, but they're enormously valuable to us because, they can eat the leaves of the trees and they don't have to graze on the ground. But there you go, the answers that are out there that I didn't know about, but they're onto these tree climbing cattle.
Well, so you got the pigs that can fly. You've got the tree climbing cattle. I mean, it's a very hard life that you guys go through every day. Then you've got to wash that down with a beer or two. I mean, it's just shocking. But we admire you for your intestinal fortitude, just getting through this time.
And also, we've got up here. Crocodiles that can read signs. It says crocodiles beware, so the crocodiles know when they see that sign that they don't go there. But there was one 15-footer underneath that sign at I think it was Mission Beach. Yeah. So not all of them can read and write. Not all the crocodiles can read.
Very scary part of the world. Now tell us about the food bowl concept. I mean, Tony Abbott was a great supporter of the food bowl, and especially for North Queensland. What do we need to make it happen?
Peter Cridlin, I watched her in a rage some months ago because she made the decision to give the National Party people $540 million for water, and they spent the $540 million, and there's no water. There's not a single dam. And I hope Scott Morrison doesn't mind me saying this, but I think he'd probably like it. I said, Scott, where is the $540 million for water? And he was treasurer, so he said, it's gone. I said, where did it go? And he said, I'm not going to tell you. And I said, if I was you, I wouldn't tell me either. It's gone. But there's another 400 million that has been spent on looking at dams. And I mean, the Liberal Party particularly, I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny. Every single election for 31 years, they've told us that they're going to build dams. And we still haven't got a dam. Now, there is a dam starting in March next year. The charter tells where. And I only had the power for 9 days. And I was able to get a dam out of it in 9 days. But we fight on. But 31 years, the Liberals have been there, no dams. The ALP, well, they've been there for 31 years in the state, effectively, and they did build a dam actually, but then they pulled it down. So,
But you see, we breed rocket scientists. They're all rocket scientists, aren't they?
Well, the record will read that for 31 years in this country, we closed down every single sophisticated industry. We wrecked every single agricultural industry, with the possible exception of cotton. It's not going ahead, but it's not going backwards. All the others are going backwards. Dairy's down, sugarcane's down, cattle's down, wool's almost gone from this country. The one asset that carried this country's economy for 200 years was completely destroyed by Paul Keating. He wrecked it comprehensively. 172 million sheep, now we've got 62 million sheep. That's all that's left. And about half of them are not wool sheep. They're just fat lambs. So a tragedy created by our politicians, and it was never restored by the incoming LNP. We've been there now, as I say, for 31 years. But there's no secondary industry, and of course, primary industry is vanishing. We do have quarrying. We do have quarrying. We're very big in quarrying. That is the lowest common denominator in an economy. It's the simple moron economies. They quarry. No, they let other people come in and quarry. Let me just give you a figure. There's 3 big export items, obviously, are iron ore, coal, and gas. Now, gas brings in 30 billion, is that right? No, this year, sorry, $65 billion this year. It's almost as big as coal. It comes in Australia and it boomerangs back out again. We get nothing out of it because we sold it all. Oh, it's not like quarrying where, you've got people working in the quarry, although with automated vehicles, they might get like gas, so we get nothing out of it at all. Transfer pricing means no taxation. And if there are no employees, there's no payroll tax. So all you're down to is mineral royalties. But let me just come back to gas. So here's the big 3, right? 65 billion gas, 70 billion coal, 90 billion iron ore. They're the 3 big ones. Nothing even remotely close to them. Next one's aluminium, which is more or less announced it's closing down. Electricity prices too on Australia. But it's only 10 billion. Let me go back to gas. Out of $65 billion production, we get around $3.5 billion. Qatar, a country in the Middle East, is the other biggest gas exporter on earth. They produce almost identical amount that we produce. They get $29 billion a year out of their gas. We get a bit over $3 billion for our gas. So that's wages, payroll tax, everything, all combined. You end up with $3 billion in Australia. In Qatar, you end up with near enough to $30 billion. And I mean, I deeply regret to say it, but this bloke I've got a lot of time and respect for, and I like personally Barnaby Joyce, and I don't know how he arrived at giving the award stage 2 and stage 3 to China, but it's gone. I don't know how much your water rights has gone overseas, but the gas, what a terrible tragedy. You sold it for 6 cents, and you're buying it back for $16.60, and we can't afford to buy it. So the Northwest Mineral Province is collapsing because we can't afford to buy the gas.
Bob, how do you think the Queensland election will go, and how do you think the minor parties will fare?
You know, I know a lot of people that are very good commentators, and polls are very, very bad for small parties. I don't know why. When I say small parties, well, I really don't think that KP and Pauline Hanson are small parties in the northern half of the state. 10, 20 seats in the northern half of the state. So even though it's completely dominated Queensland by the southeast corner, the swing seats are in the north. So the election will be decided in the north. In Brisbane, just everyone I speak to says that the Labor Party could win 3 off the Liberals, maybe 4. But then again, 2 of those could go to the Greens. The Greens have already got 1. So if you're looking at a natural coalition of the Greens and Labor, they will come out of that southeast corner with an extra 5 or 6 seats. Since the ALP, and admittedly, CFMEU, my union, taking out trad, you know, it's helped them in the north. But it was too late, too little too late to take trad out to rescue their position in the north. They got 31% in the last election, the ALP in North Queensland, and the 15 seats up here. KP and One Nation, we have a very tight exchange of preferences. We got 30.5%, and the Liberals got 27%. So, you know, the ALP is not going to get 31% this time. No way. So they will drop down. I mean, I would think clearly that ourselves and One Nation up here will go forward somewhat, and the Liberals will go forward somewhat. But as to who wins the seats, we are in a very powerful position because we get One Nation's preferences. And if the Liberals come last, we get their preferences over Labor. And if Labor comes last, we get their preferences over the Liberals. So that makes us looking very, very strong in 4 or 5 seats, on top of what we already hold, which is arguably 4 seats. So in summary, it's going to be very, very interesting because everyone's saying they're going to pick up seats in the southeast corner, that Greens, Labor axis. No one's denying that we move forward to KP very, very strongly, particularly in the greater Townsville area, where 4 of those swing seats are. We already hold 1 of the Townsville seats, but we're going after the other 4. 2 of them are in the coalfields, and we're very, very strong in coalfields. I'm very proud flag waving member of the CFMEU, which a lot of people don't like, but that's the way it is. I worked as a miner as a young bloke, and you know, I think, you know, we as an aspirational class, miners are not working class, they're aspirational class. We as an aspirational class must have solidarity and a strong bargaining position, and we must have arbitration. And the very sad thing about Australia is the arbitration was taken away from the farmers, and it's been seriously undermined for the aspirational class as well. So while the farmers got no arbitration, no rights to protect themselves, the workers still have rights to protect themselves, but those rights are not very good these days. And remember, people say, oh, our huge wage structure has destroyed the country. We'll never be able to do anything. Wages are a very small component. Everything's mechanised these days. I got lost in a sugar mill. We employed 400-500 people once upon a time. I got lost in the sugar mill. Admittedly, it was at night time. but it's shifted. And I couldn't find anyone. I worked for 2 minutes and I didn't see a single person. I went like, it's all under controls from a control room. There's very little labour, in industry these days. In mining, some will argue it's as high as 22%. I would argue it's around 10% of the cost structure is labour costs. And our greatest boast when we were in government, as country/national party, our greatest boast was the highest wages paid anywhere in the world were paid in Queensland. That was our boast. Now it's defined as the problem.
What's your vision for Queensland over the next decade?
We will seize control. And North Queensland, like California, there's 100,000 people living in California. And a lot of people said they're too small to form a separate state. I think you'd be aware that California is the biggest agricultural producing state on earth. It has complete control of maybe one of the biggest industries on earth, the entertainment industry. It's totally based on California, almost totally. The Silicon Valley, the communications industry, is almost totally run out of California. And most of California is desert, was desert. They built dams and diversions, Bradfield schemes. But the Bradfield scheme in New South Wales, the Bradfield scheme is the Clarence River diversion. In South Australia, it's the Bradfield's alternative, which just dig a big ditch up and fill Lake Eyre with water, which will make it rain in the centre of Australia. It's Bradfield option 2. The revised Bradfield scheme, which irrigates all of central and North Queensland. The bridging scheme, which is the Bradfield and Western Australia. The Ord and Fitzroy rivers are diverted, dammed and diverted. And there's huge underground aquifers which can complement that water supply. Ernie Bridge was the architect of that scheme. Interesting character. He's a senior cabinet minister in the West Australian government. He was the first Australian and the only first Australian to be appointed a minister, and a very senior minister at that. But Bridgie, like myself, just reached a point where the party system was looking after Perth. The party system here looks after Brisbane, and eventually you just can't live with it any longer. And you've got to go back to being the Country Party or the North Queensland Party or whatever. We're calling ourselves KP, and all of Western New South Wales now is under the Shooters and Farmers Party, and almost all of North Queensland and the area is under the KP. So we're getting there. We're getting there. And when I look at what the little tiny party that was born up here called the Labor Party did for the state, there are very few governments anywhere in the world did for Queensland what the Labor Party did for Queensland. And they split in two, and we all ended up in the Country Party, Kevin Rudd's family and mine, being two of them, and ended up in the Country Party. And I think there are very few governments in the world that did for Queensland what the Country Party, particularly Joh Bjelke-Petersen and Leo Hilcher, as a public servant, did for Queensland. We created the coal industry out of nothing. We're a coal importing country. We created the aluminium industry out of nothing. We created the sugarcane industry out of a wilderness. We did just wonderful, marvellous things. We instituted in North Queensland our party, the prawn and fish farming industry of Australia, was born up here in North Queensland, a modern industry. And funnily enough, we put the first standalone solar system in Australia. I think we could have taken a wrong turn there, but all the same, there's great uses for that in isolated situations. So my dream is that we create a world of wonder, hope and excitement. That a young bloke didn't have two bob to his name, dropped out of university, and worked as a labourer in the mines at Mount Isa Mines. Within 20 years, he could own 250,000 acres of cattle stations without owing any debt on it. He was floating his own mining company, and later on he became the second ranking minister in the Queensland government. I know those things to be true because that bloke happens to be me. But it breaks my heart that the young people, the aspirational classes that I wasn't frightened to go out there and work with my hands in the mines and do the hard yards. But I was working to make it better for me, and I hope to make it better for my country. And I want to turn us back into a... You can't take up any leases now. It's impossible for a bloke working in the mines to take up a mining lease. That cannot occur in this country. We had ballot systems happening every year. We'd be big dam, and we'd ballot out 400 farming blocks. So a young bloke would get up and go. He'd go in the ballot, he'd win the ballot, and he'd be worth $500,000 instantaneously. But then he had to make it work. So we were the land of freedom, hope, fun, and opportunity. There were no gun laws in Queensland at all. To give you an idea, there was no breathalyzer tests in Queensland. This wasn't ancient history. This was in 1990. There was no gun laws in Queensland. We had no deaths with guns. We had 8, and Victoria had 54 with draconian laws. So it was a land of fun, hope, and excitement. You didn't get thrown in jail for chopping down a tree, which you needed to make a table in your house or to make a shed. You didn't get thrown in jail for that, or to knock the top of the tree over to feed your cattle. You didn't get put in jail for that. You didn't get put in jail for shooting a deadly snake in your house or a crocodile in your backyard.
Reading a book, of course.
Yeah, anyway, you get where I'm going, and you know what I'm saying. But that place of wonder, hope and excitement, the sort of people that went up to Kokoda outnumbered 15-1 with one machine gun, and we won. We won at great cost to ourselves. It's still there. All those things are still there. And we just got to sweep away what we got in Canberra and in Brisbane. We just got to sweep it away.
Bob Katter, a pleasure talking. We'll do this again and we'll really get into some nitty gritty. Queensland, besides those tree climbing cattle, besides the flying pigs, besides the crocodiles that can read, which makes them even more dangerous, it's a wonderful, wonderful state. You're just doing a fantastic job. Keep up the great work and thank you very much.
God bless all listeners.